Good morning and welcome. My name is Peter Fishman, and I'm the child of a Holocaust survivor, Tootie Fishman, who's here today. I'm also president of Voices of Hope, an organization dedicated to Holocaust and genocide education. Thank you for joining us today at the Mandel JCC's Descendants of the Shoah Speak Up Showcase. Preparing for the next generations to use their own voices to shape the future has always been a goal of Voices of Hope. And standing here today at the 5th Speak Up is a true accomplishment and honor. Please join me in welcoming Matt and Alicia Dix.
For the past 4 weeks, this incredible group of children and grandchildren of survivors has been working on finding and crafting their stories. They participated in a workshop that was led by Matt, who will also tell a story today about his experience with Voices of Hope. And they've been working on telling stories that include part, but not all, of their parents or grandparents' stories, because the task of telling the entire thing is too daunting a job. And so they've been working on choosing pieces to embed in their own stories about their own experience. It's kind of like history embedded in personal narrative. All right, now our next storyteller is Lindsay Tringali. Lindsay has been a high school educator for 19 years, which you're going to be surprised about when you see her because she apparently began when she was only 9. She's currently an assistant principal at Conard High School. Lindsay chose Gilda Radner as her Jewish imaginary friend. She says that even though Lindsay, seems very serious, she likes to find humor in all situations, and Gilda would make it impossible not to do that. I am super behind your choice. I feel like my imaginary friend, who you may see behind me, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she and I will join you and Gilda for some exploits. Please welcome Lindsay Tringali.
I'm lying in bed in my childhood home with my Omi, my grandmother. We're underneath a 1970s floral print quilt. She's 90 pounds, she's frail, and she's dying of cancer. I actually remember snuggling in closer, trying to snuggle in with her, which is it's funny for 2 reasons, or maybe awkward for 2 reasons. One, she was not a very snuggly person. And 2, this is a time where she should be looking for comfort from others. And here I was selfishly stealing her strength and trying to find comfort in her during her time of need. But I guess that's pretty typical of the self-absorbed 18-year-old that I was. My biggest stress at that moment, other than my grandmother, of course, was whether or not Mrs. Healy, my AP French teacher, would round up my 89.4 to make it a 90. Because I was convinced if she didn't, it would be the end of my academic success as I knew it. She didn't. But I was also the kind of kid who actually enjoyed spending time with old people, talking to them in nursing homes, and listening to their stories because I genuinely liked hearing them. And I did this while my friends, yes, I had friends, while my friends would binge watch recorded episodes of Beverly Hills 90210 before deciding what party they were going to hit that night. And I was also the kind of kid, a genius, I like to think anyway. At 7 years old, my parents were dropping me off at sleepaway camp. And instead of the long, drawn-out goodbye like all of my friends had, I quickly said goodbye and ran to my bunk as fast as I could and went into my army green duffel bag and pulled out the cordless phone that I snuck in there so that I might be able to communicate with my family at home from camp. So much to my dismay, it didn't work, but I think I was more disappointed because it kind of proved I wasn't the genius I thought I was. So here I am, sitting next to my grandmother, and I am mustering up all the courage in me to ask her a pretty difficult question. I look at her and I say, Omi, you have led the most difficult life I've ever heard of. It's just so unfair that now you're trying to fight off death. How are you not angry? Where do you find your strength? It's the summer 1943. Omi's been in my Donnick for 3 months. She's waiting in line with her empty cup to be filled with the diluted soup that should constitute a meal. And she's waiting in line for the soup, knowing that she's about to be transported to Auschwitz. She learned early in the concentration camp never to look up, always look down, never make eye contact with anyone. So she's in line, her empty cup up and her head down, and she feels a tug on the cup. So she tugs back, and then she feels a tug again, and she looks up, and she sees my grandfather. And you have to understand, my grandfather made himself indispensable at the concentration camps. He was blonde hair, blue-eyed, spoke fluent German, Polish, and Yiddish, and was often called upon by his capo to translate, for example. Any favor that he did for the capo returned for small favors for him. Those favors always benefited Omi, always. The favor he got this time was working in the kitchen, the most sought-after job in the concentration camp, if there is such a thing. But it allowed him to have that moment with Omi. And he looked her in the eyes, and he said, I know you're going to Auschwitz. Don't worry. I'll be there soon. I'll follow you. She now had someone to live for. And he actually did follow her. It's in Auschwitz that Omi realizes she's 4 to 5 months pregnant. If her current situation of being in the concentration camp were in a death sentence, she was sure that this would be the end of her, and she would be sent to what she referred to as the dead barracks. She asked the Polish woman in her barrack, the one that was in charge of the barrack, if she could just get a word to her husband. And the woman said, make it quick. So she did. She wrote a note, and it said, you need to come see me, because I'm going to die soon. A few days later, Omi received a letter back from Opie, and it said, Alina, if you want me to live, you need to live for me. Stay strong for me, Alina. Opie, in his resourcefulness, was able to get Omi transferred to a Gentile barrack for the remainder of her pregnancy. It's there she met a Gentile Russian woman who lost her baby during delivery. And Omi, who was overcome with what would be of the baby once the baby's born, asked this woman, could you take my baby just until the end of the war, take my baby? And in her desperation, promised this woman the world. And this woman looked at her and she said, I can't. It's even too hard for me. So Omi carried the baby to term and had a normal delivery. And I say normal because she gave birth in the barrack. In the middle of the barrack is a half a brick wall. And on one side of that half a brick wall has a fire. And that fire is now the heat source for the entire barrack. And she laid on that and delivered her baby, my uncle. When he was born, Omi heard the cries right away, and the midwife came and took the baby. So Omi thought, well, she's taking the baby to clean the baby, and then she'll bring me back my baby so I can feed and comfort him. She didn't bring the baby back, and Omi said, well, can you bring me my baby? And the midwife said, no, I can't. If I bring you your baby, you're going to die with your baby. And Omi said, I don't care, just bring me my baby. I want to die with my baby. Bring me my baby. And the cries continued for days. And then the crying stopped. So here I am, whimpering at best, lying next to Omi in this flower print quilt, trying to pull the strength from her in the same way she could pull from Opie. Again, feeling ridiculously selfish about it, but recognizing I needed to find strength from somewhere, and she had plenty to spare, it seemed. And I'm waiting in anticipation to hear her answer. And I know what it's going to be because I know her well enough. And she doesn't disappoint me when she says, what good would it do to be angry? My God, Omi, even in your weakest moment, you are still the strongest woman I have ever known. I miss you every day. I promise to tell the stories of your strength and perseverance to my daughters, Ava and Alina, who's named for you. Because after all, they wouldn't be here without it. Thank you.
Fantastic job, Lindsay. That is a hard story to hear. But I think it's a reminder as to why it's so important that people tell these stories and that we need to know what happened and other people need to know what happened, because there are people that deny that this stuff happened and they want to smooth over what happened, and it's important to tell this stuff, so thank you. Lindsay's parents this morning, George and Nancy, arrived from Florida to surprise Lindsay by being here. And George was in our showcase, I think 2 showcases back. So thank you again, Lindsay. Wonderful job.